We're live.
We're live. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, committee witnesses and the public. We're going to get started with Commissioner Goldstein. We're talking about economic development programs that were passed and continued last session, and we're trying to get an update. Some of them have written reports. Some of them will be more oral. We have backup people that work with Joan to fill in some of the details, but I'm going to let Joan start off and introduce. My understanding is we're going to talk about the relocated worker program first because of time commitments and schedules. So the floor is yours, Commissioner Goldstein. Welcome. Good to see you.
Thanks very much, Chairman Sirotkin, and good morning, senators, and hope all is well with everyone this morning. To introduce you, I'd like to, you might have already met Brett Long. He's our Deputy Commissioner who's worked on just about every program and helped develop them. You'll be hearing from Kristen Zeider, who you might have met last year when we talked about new worker and relocated worker. And our newest addition is Jessica Hartleben, who is our staff attorney, who has helped us wade through the amount of statute and federal guidance with all the programs that we're about to talk about. You had mentioned, how many were passed, and I could say that we've had a rather robust summer, fall, and winter so far, actually executing on all of the tasks and programs that have been developed. I just, kudos out to the team. It's been, as I said, rather robust. So we will review the relocated worker, the economic recovery bridge grant, brownfields, capital investment, the Montreal rep, T-bed to some extent. It's not fully executed just yet, as well as the RFP we've been working on with SSBCI. So some have more or less detail. What I think we'll do is let's hear from Kristen, because on new worker, what we're going to find is it will be fully subscribed with the queue that we have right now. And there's also some changes and details that are worth mention about who we may be leaving out because of the short-term occupational list. So if that's okay, I'll just kick it off to Kristen to take us through the numbers.
Okay, sounds
Sure,
good. Welcome,
thanks.
Kristen.
Thank you. Good morning. So this year's worker relocation program launched in mid-August. Between July 1st and then we developed the application portal to incorporate the changes from last year's relocation program to this year's program. As anticipated, as soon as we launched, we started receiving applications. So far to date, and these numbers are through yesterday, there's been 172 applications initiated in the system. And we have approved 53 of those applications. 31 have been denied. Most of the denial reasons have been because the occupations that the applicants have filled are not included on the list. Some of them are close, but the list is the basis of the occupational projection list is federal occupational coding. So the occupational coding is very specific.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Very quickly? Are you keeping those applications of people who were denied to the extent we can change the law, or are
Yes.
those people out of luck because they applied when the law didn't apply to them?
There's some of them have been denied. Some of them are still in progress, and the verification of the occupation is in the works. So if we were to change the statute to eliminate that list or allow for a waiver from the occupational list, we could go back and change them. The portal, it's pretty simple in the portal to change the status of an application. And they would still qualify with the other criteria.
So it's a question probably for Joan. Is there going to be an effort by the administration to do that in budget adjustment? To change?
I think we would urge this change to not be aligned with budget adjustment, but just could there be an amendment to the current statute? Because we're not, if we could change that, we could go back and with all those applications that we've denied or that are in process, we could help them, but not have it tied to budget adjustment.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, we're going to obviously hear more from the consultants report. I think they highlighted this as a problem as well, didn't they?
Indeed.
And then it's going to be convincing the House to change it. This is not something, if I recall,
we did not initiate.
Also, one of the things that happened when we were negotiating this out at midnight or something, we were focused more about the money. And then after we agreed on the money, I raised my hand and said, well, we have other issues too. And other people that were more in control than I was said, we're done with negotiating this anymore. So, and it was unfortunate because there were some big things that still left to be said, but we were trying to keep the program alive at that point. So
understood and appreciated. Yes.
Mr. Chair, may I just add, I mean, all of us have heard about the eligibility, the need to change the eligibility and criteria here. And I'm hoping when we have this conversation that we'll hear from Betsy Bishop and Terry, the Bar Association. There's so many different employers across the state that are really eager for this and are hoping we will open up the criteria and make it a lot less restrictive. So we're looking forward to this conversation.
Okay.
Sorry. Question, Chair.
Okay. Sorry, Kristen. This happens in this committee. Senator Brock?
Just a question also regarding the applicants and their various stages of application, acceptance and approval or denial. Have, particularly the people who have been denied, have they typically already moved to Vermont, or is their move presumably at least partially contingent upon acceptance into the program?
They have already moved to Vermont. So once grantees, applicants, once people move to Vermont, then they apply, submit all of their supporting documentation for their relocation expenses. In the position that they've filled, the employer fills out another, like part 2 of the application, and then the application is reviewed.
Well, that has been criticisms that we've heard about the program, is that rather than being an incentive to get people to move to Vermont, it is something that people who have already moved to Vermont then go to seek to collect, but it's not necessarily having anything to do with them making the decision to move here in the first place. Do you have any perspective on that?
Yeah, we have a worker relocation email box set up. So we're fielding inquiries all year long from people who have, heard about the program in the media. They've had a family member send them information about the program, or, they've heard about it somehow. And, a lot of times they'll start talking to us, asking us for information about, housing or schools or different regions of the state. So many of these people we are connecting with before they actually make their move. And then when they make their move, that's when they fill out the application.
I think this is also addressed in the report somewhat. Joan, do you want to talk about the tension here and the administration and how
Sure. Yeah, we've so when this started in 2018, we really had no idea how to administer it, to be quite honest. It was brand new, and we in terms of how to track and pre-approvals and pre-committing funds and all of that kind of daunted us. So we've been carrying it through that they had to have moved, and then we honor their reimbursement. In the report, which I think we're aligned with, the report was like, well, you kind of want to, you could make the approval before, you could change it so that people know that they will be assured the funds if they move, so that it really does help them with the move. In other words, it's committed money rather than taking a chance, taking a chance, we might be out of money, which has happened to some people. So we may make that change. The other change that the report talked about was, instead of forcing them to do reimbursement of expenses, you give them a grant. You basically give them a grant. You kind of pre-approve them. You don't give them the money. When they come in, then they get the funds. There's a few caveats. One, what if they don't make the move? Did we pre-commit funds? How long do we give them to make the move? So there's a few admin hurdles, but I don't think that would cost more to administer. It would just depend on the amounts. Like, do we have more money? Do we have to do more tracking? So we'd have to look at that, but it does make some sense. I think, tracking all the reimbursement expenses is very administratively heavy. So if we could eliminate that, do the pre-approval, have more of a feeling that it is influencing their move. Having said all of that, the report did find that about 50% of the people they interviewed said that it was a major influence in their decision. So depends how we feel about that 50%. Is that good enough? Do we want more? Do we want 100%? Like, what are our goals?
Do you think, this is definitely a legitimate point of discussion and potentially improvement in the program. I think going into the program, establishing it, it was clearly labeled as to be an incentive to get people to come to Vermont. Obviously, we got a lot of publicity, and that helped in other regards, and including this program. But if we can fine tune it to make sure that we don't have people who are already here and have never heard of the program, and then all of a sudden they learn of it and say, give me $5,000. I think we want to avoid that situation. Still a small growing program that I think is sound in its basis, but can be tweaked and improved. So,
yeah. Senator
Brock?
Just a question regarding the concept of grants rather than reimbursement. As I recall, what we found with these programs in the past is, although we have an upper ceiling as to the amount of money that could be given to an individual, they typically have asked for considerably less by way of reimbursement. As you are looking at grants, would you be looking at grants at the top end of the program scale without reimbursement validation or request, or would you be looking at some lesser amount based on individual circumstances?
Yeah, to be quite honest, we haven't gotten that into the weeds on that. That is a recommendation of the report, and I think we're waiting to see what folks say about it. We're set up to do it the way we do it now, so there's less admin to make that change. So it'd just be a question of weighing out, which direction do we want to go forward? I think the other thing that was brought out in the report is not to make changes each and every year, because there's a lot of confusion in the marketplace. Like, there's a 2018 program, there's a 2019 program, there's a 2020 program, all have little different requirements. So I think our effort is to make sure that we do something that's kind of solid. If we want to follow the recommendations of the consultant, we would take all of that into consideration, right? Nothing is 100% proof that people are going to get here. Nothing is 100% that we're going to spend less or more money. I couldn't tell you. I think the average, Kristen, what's the average award this year?
The average award this year has been just over $4,700.
So that's up.
That's up.
Yeah, that's up.
What?
But
800, wasn't it?
it was 30.
I think so. Yeah, I think I remember it was being in 3,800. But expenses have gone up. It's very expensive to move. Very. Yeah.
Mr. Chair. may I-
Yes. Yes.
Sorry. So to that point, I think, I mean, I think this grant, or how, let's still talk about it as a grant, because we always, I mean,
Reimbursement.
this grant isn't enough to, I think, Randy, justify a move. However, it's a carrot. I think I've always viewed it as an additional carrot to sweeten the idea of coming to Vermont over going elsewhere. So it's a balancing act, I think, but you know, in terms of when we have them apply, I think having them apply before they come is premature in a way, because it's just not big enough grant to justify moving a whole family. But it certainly is a sweetener when you add the pros and cons, when you're doing your pros and cons about moving. This is certainly a nice sweetener as a pro for moving to Vermont.
I think another really big advantage of this program is it just brings attention to Vermont, to
Yes.
put the Vermont in the mix of people's considerations of where they might want to move. And it's sort of like taking a bill off the wall. Unless you get in the mix, you're nowhere. So, and this
Yeah.
definitely brings attention to Vermont
Yeah.
as a possible state.
Good point.
I did see recently that I think New York is going to do something similar.
Of course, copycat.
So the most common occupation that we've seen this year, probably because of the time of year when the program started, is teachers. We've had a lot of teachers that we've granted to, private schools, many different districts. So that's been a positive outcome. We've also seen carpenters, restaurant and retail workers, childcare workers, truck drivers. So those are some positive things. You know, the biggest issue that we're seeing is the occupational list. When it comes to plumbers, LPNs, LNAs, those are not occupations that are included in the list. Preschool teachers are not included in the list. You know, these are not occupations that we want to be turning away. You know,
Right.
they've made the move here. They are expecting to be included in the list. And with the high number of openings with Vermont employers, we've heard from numerous employers, small employers with 5 employees to large employers, such as Cabot Creamery, that are having to, you know, reduce their operations because they can't find enough workers. You know, they're reaching out to us because they want to find out if there's something we can do to include their occupations in the list, and that we're not able to.
So what the list represents the 50 job occupations that are most in demand in Vermont. Is that how, is that, no?
It's the most vacancies, right? Do you have the technical description, Kristen?
Yeah, it's the short-term occupational projections with the most openings. So it's based on data from the last 10 years of occupations that have had the most quantity of openings.
So is that a percentage basis or just actually hard raw numbers?
Quantity, yep, numbers.
Wow, that doesn't make sense just in and of itself. But how is it that nurses or some forms of nurses don't make that list?
Registered nurses are on the list.
Oh, but LPNs are not. Okay.
Mr. Chair, may I tag onto your question?
Yes.
So, Kristen, if you were going to change this, if we want to act fast on this, which I think we do, I mean, at least I would hope we would act fast on this and try and get something done in the next couple of weeks. What would you recommend as how to change this now?
I would remove the occupational projection list. You know, I honestly can't think of one that we've denied for that reason, that isn't a valuable employee in the state. And we are fully subscribed. So, you know, I think we need to at least double the appropriation. $480,000 doesn't fund a lot of workers. We've currently awarded about half of the appropriation, and we can see the applications that are pending in the portal. We won't have enough money to fund all of them.
So to follow up on our conversation about the budget adjustment, it sounds like you would welcome a budget adjustment upward on this, and at the same time, get rid of the occupational list and replace it with what, a waiver, or just an open, you know, have you, if you're going through and processing these individually, you can look at each one individually and make a decision. Do we even need to have an occupational list?
I don't think we do.
Yeah.
So
At a time when we're looking for healthcare workers, you know, and essential workers, teachers, we've got people dropping out of the workforce in every industry. I think we need all workers.
I think eliminating the list is great, but knowing that the House put it in, you know, maybe a waiver might be easier to get. I mean, it's another step for us to waive somebody from having to be on that list. In terms of the additional money, like I said, we're not going in to ask for that for BAA, but I think one caveat would be on any changes would be if there is a long tail of demand, to not have them X'd out of the program just because we now decided on a different methodology, which has happened year after year on this program. So that would be the only thing I would say, you know, is like at least have them honor those who have applied that would have otherwise been eligible.
Could you talk about the difference in how you're handling or what's going on with what used to be called the remote worker program versus the relocated worker program? I know we merged them, but I also know we've delayed any acceptance of people who are working for out-of-state companies that moved to Vermont.
Yes, the remote worker grants will begin on February 1st. So that application is still in development. We have had, you know, we've had numerous inquiries from people that are planning their moves, people that are in the process of either purchasing a house or leasing an apartment. So we do anticipate that funding will also be used up very quickly. There's $130,000 for those applicants. And with the average being 4,700, that only funds 27 applications. So
Do you have a form letter that goes out to people who inquire on the remote worker at all?
no, usually their inquiries are very unique to their situation.
Okay.
But-
Senator Clarkson.
yeah, so that goes to the analysis. I mean, if every one of these is unique, then it does make sense. I mean, you're casting individualized and making individual choices about each person, whether they're a remote worker or a new worker to Vermont. It does strike me that everybody can be, I mean, maybe it's a waiver, but whichever. I think we should, if we have a workforce shortage, which we do, this is one tool in a big toolbox that we hope to deploy on this challenge that we face. This is something we should do, I think, as soon as we can.
Okay. Do you, if you don't have anything more on this and there are no further questions, you piqued my interest on the comment about New York. Do you have any information you can get us where you've heard about New York establishing a similar program?
I can see what I can find. It was in the governor's State of the State address yesterday.
Oh, was it? Okay.
you know, she's from Buffalo, Mr. Chair, so she's full of good ideas. And she knows where to look to get them.
It's a clan up there, I'll tell you. Okay.
Well, there are I think there are about 46 programs across the country now, 26 different municipalities or states. Mainly municipalities have it, but it's interesting that New York would do it as a state.
Sounds good. Okay.
Great.
And just so you know, I'm going to try and get the consultant to talk to us virtually about their report, and we'll give the auditor equal time once again. But it sounds like if we're going to do something, this seems like such a small, productive program in some ways that, and it has had this checkered past in terms of on, off, reduced, increased and stuff that, I think we need to get it on a course sooner than later and not have another hiatus where people are told that we ran out of money for 6 months.
Right.
So we'll spend some time. I know it's dear to everyone. I don't want to speak for Senator Rahm Hinsdale because she's new to it, but everybody else on the committee has expressed their strong support for it. Senator Rahm Hinsdale.
Yeah. Obviously I'm new to it. I have warmed up to this program greatly. I think that our colleagues and the general public could still benefit from some storytelling, from actually hearing from a couple of the people who have benefited from this program, who are excited to be Vermonters. I just hope before we pass this, we can just hear from some folks who have benefited from this and have moved to the state and made their homes here. I think that would just help us feel really solid in supporting this program.
That's a great point, Senator, and we are working on that.
So if you can get that to us in short order, then we'll figure out how to disseminate it. But if you can send us a few pages of stories, I know there are a lot of good ones out there. Have been some articles about people who come, but we could probably can do a better. Good point. Thank you. Let's move on, Commissioner.
Great. And now what you've all been waiting for is the discussion on the Economic Recovery Bridge Program. And Brett will take us through it. There are some very good slides that we could share. Can you?
Yeah, let me start by giving the background, and then I'll introduce the slides. So the program is a little bit complicated. So let me just review for everybody that initially it was created in Act 9 with a $10 million appropriation. There was priority provided to businesses that had not received any prior state or federal assistance. And that priority took two forms. One is that we only processed those applications during the first 30 days. And then we've continued to provide priority to those applications going forward. To be eligible, applicants have to be able to demonstrate that they had a 2020 tax loss. And the awards are calculated as 3 times the fixed monthly expenses up to the amount of their loss and a maximum of $150,000. Just to recall that, fixed monthly expenses are things like rent, heat, utilities, that kind of thing. The loss is calculated off of their profit and loss statements for the period from March 2020 through April 2021. So that information is getting a little long in the tooth as we have gotten to this point in the year. And then in addition, there was another $20 million appropriated to the program in Act 74. So in total, there's $30 million available to fund applications to the program. So let me share some slides at this point. I guess somebody needs to let me do it.
Oh.
Go on.
Scott, are you on that or do you want me to?
Yeah. Mr. Long, you should be co-host now.
Okay. Are you seeing the slides?
Not yet.
Close the slide.
They're on,
I'm sure I'm not as familiar with Zoom as I am with Teams. I see them on my screen, but you don't see them, huh?
yeah, and they're not in the report because we do have the report here.
No.
They're in addition, obviously. Yeah.
How do I get back?
Escape, I think.
Oh, share screen. Oh, here we go. Let me try this.
Yep. Bingo.
All right, good. All right, so let me go to this. Okay, so as I say, we have $30 million appropriated in total. Thus far, we've awarded about $3.6 million. And you can see that from this donut chart that this is a distribution by county. Every county except Essex is represented. The next chart is actually a little better for demonstrating the county share, but it does actually make a pretty good representation based upon economic activity and population as it's spread across counties. The average award is about $30,000, so relatively low. We've awarded 119 applications. 35 of those are first priority applications. 84 of them are second priority applications. 8 of them are nonprofit organizations. 111, therefore, are for-profit. Go to the next slide. And I think this slide does a good job of representing the fact that the industries that we believe have been most impacted have done relatively better in terms of awards. So agriculture has received about $800,000. It's one of the largest. Manufacturing is about $600,000, and accommodation food services over $1 million. So over a third of the awards. The interesting thing about this program is how different the application process is from our 2 prior economic recovery grant programs. So this shows that in the round 1 program, about 50% of the applications that were started were submitted. In round 2, about 57% of the applications that were started were submitted.
Brett, can you just give us a brief overview on round 1 and round 2 when you're talking about that?
Yeah, so these are the 2 CRF rounds that we did earlier, prior to the Bridge Grant Program.
Right, I understand that, but can you just give brief parameters on the amount of money and the qualification requirements?
Yeah, you're going to test my memory here. We've started so many programs that I don't know if I can pull that up off the top of my...
I could interject if that's a lifeline. It's like indelibly placed on my brain, unfortunately or fortunately. The first round, we did a calculation which was based on their prior year's revenue. We did a 10% of 2019 revenue. It was relatively simple process to apply. If you recall, there was also Department of Tax was involved. They were able to verify revenues based on the individual's meals and rooms and sales tax forms. The second round was based on what we called unmet need, which is based on revenue from March through September of 2019 versus March through September of 2020. And in that case, if you recall, we had a date certain that it was due, and then we did a pro rata share based on the oversubscription of demand. So again, it was quicker, it was based on revenue, and folks all came and, large percentages of them got through the application process and large percentages of them were ultimately awarded. And now when we move to round 3, you'll see a stark contrast.
Right. So let me just
So
ask,
roughly,
let me just ask Joan on round 2, just one asterisk there is that hospitality got guaranteed 100% of the
Yes,
up to the cap. What was the cap at that point? Do you remember?
that was $300,000 in phase 2.
And what was the pro rata share for everybody else? 47, 50?
Oh, now you're testing my memory.
yeah, that one I do
It
remember. It was
yeah.
41.9%.
Right.
Thank you. Yep. Okay, good.
So the as Joan says, the stark difference is when we get to round 3, it's only 20% of those applications that have been started are ultimately submitted. Okay.
Okay.
And you can see the same.
In the unsubmitted portion, is that more than just a phone call? You have a paper thing that's signed by somebody that's saying they applied for the program?
So this is an online portal, so we can keep track of people who start an application but don't ultimately finish it. So that's really what this is representing, is that there are, in this program, there are roughly 1,600 people who have started applications, but only 300 of them have completed the application. So the indication is that for some reason they're deciding either they're not eligible or it's not worth it or whatever, but they're not proceeding to actually submitting the application.
Does starting an application in terms of your calculation include someone who just puts his name and address on the thing?
It's anything.
Okay.
But it's really, we're using the same measure across the different programs.
And Mr. Chair, may I ask?
Yes, Senator Clarkson.
Brett, number one reason given for not finishing, because I know you followed up with a bunch of these. What's the reason given for not finishing the application?
Yeah, we got that survey was done a long time ago, and there were very few responses. I don't know if I could actually say that it's anything more than anecdotal information.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I think let me go through another set of slides and then maybe make me a more complete discussion.
And can we get these slides over to, if you haven't already, to Scott so he can post them?
Sure.
Yeah, we could do that.
So the other interesting piece is now this is again looking at the round 1 applications. So of those that were submitted, so as I said, in round 1 and round 2, it was around 50% of the applications that were started were submitted. Now looking just at the submitted, we awarded about 87% of those, or made awards. So roughly 87% of those that were submitted. A small number were incomplete, and small numbers were also ineligible or denied. Sorry, somebody had a question.
This is Senator Ballant, Brett.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Senator Ballant.
Thank you. Could you just briefly characterize the ones that you deemed to be ineligible or were denied, just so we have an understanding of who was caught in that decision? Yeah,
it's easier in the first 2 programs. There were very clear eligibility questions that people were asked. So, the one that comes immediately to mind were they in good standing with the Secretary of State, for example? Were they in good standing with the Department of Tax? So there were a whole numbers of those. And unfortunately, the criteria are a little different between the programs. In one of the programs, they had to have at least one W-2 employee. So they might not have met that one, but there were a fairly long list, 15 or 20 probably eligibility questions in the first 2 rounds. So those would be examples.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So in round 2, it's pretty similar. We approved roughly 85% of the submitted applications. There were a few more that were in a somewhat larger percent, slightly larger percent that were incomplete. Actually a smaller percent that were ineligible, and about the same a percentage were denied.
Brett,
But when we get to
Brett, can you just refresh our memory, or Joan, how much money was given out in each of these first two rounds?
You got me.
Yeah.
I could go back and we could get that. I'm a bit flummoxed on it at this point. Many numbers in my head, so we could go back to a report.
Combined, it's over $100 million.
Oh
right?
yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
right.
Yeah, for sure. I want to say, roughly speaking, I remember the beginning of 21, I was saying we had about $300 million that we distributed. So I think I was always including tax in that. So, but we can get you the precise numbers. They're in a report somewhere.
Okay, great. That was great.
Okay.
So the interesting analysis is when we get to our current program, it's only about 32% of that very small submitted number of applications that are receiving awards, and a very large percent are ineligible.
So are you calling this round 3 or round 3 and 4? Are you just
Round 3, and we actually, I'll probably refer to it as the bridge program by default.
oh, sorry, can you just repeat that, Brett? It's only 32%.
It's only 32% of the submitted applications that are receiving an award, and roughly 44% are being deemed ineligible.
And how would you consider the incomplete? Likely to be denied or waiting for more information that they could potentially come through?
Very few of them in this program are providing any additional information.
Gotcha.
There was a lot of work in the first two rounds in back and forths with applicants trying to get more information. It's very little in this program.
Not for lack of our trying, by the way.
Right.
I mean, we do
people
go back. We've emailed them. We called people. We doubt any of those incomplete will end up being complete.
Gotcha.
Right. It really, the point of the slides is that really people seem to be giving up during the application process. In a series, they don't submit, then they find it's incomplete. They don't complete it. So it seems that there are quite a large number of people who are essentially giving up during the process.
And Mr. Chair, may I
Yes,
ask a follow-up? So
please.
Brett, if they're giving up, are they giving up because they don't have a tax loss and the way they've structured their taxes, they can't show a tax loss? Or are they giving up because they just, they're doing well enough now that they don't, have they recovered enough that they don't actually need it? Or are they giving up because it's just, they've lost faith in the whole process and are just discouraged?
Yeah, it's hard to know. Again, without our going back and doing a whole nother round of surveying, it's hard to know. You could say that potentially it's that the first two rounds of programs were very successful and people have been able to get back on their feet, and that's generally a good thing. The flip side is that the criteria on this program are pretty restrictive, and it's possible that people, and the grants aren't huge. The $30,000 average grant is not comparable to the averages in the earlier programs. So it's the flip side is that people maybe just think that it's not worth the time to get an award. And the other issue, as I say, is that the program was set up so that we were looking at the profitability or the loss through April of 2021, and now we're way past that date. So maybe we've dealt with all the people who had an issue through that particular point in time.
If I could also add to that, so the complaints that have come to our attention are the fact that they have to show a net loss. And even though somebody showed a small profit, does not mean that they're healed from this. And that seems to be the biggest complaint that has come to my attention, that just because someone made a $10,000 profit doesn't mean they were able to pay their bills. So that is a huge deal, I think, is the way this was structured. The other complaint is about the maximum is 150. And the other complaint is that on the fixed expenses, they want a little bit more leeway. Like I think property taxes weren't included. And so some of these people have large property tax bills. So I think all in all, it's a restrictive program. And I think these numbers kind of tell that story.
Yeah, I would just probably highlight Joan's first comment there, that especially if you think about somebody who's running a small business and they're using the profits of their business to be able to pay their personal expenses. If you broke even at your business level, that means you didn't have any money to pay your personal expenses. When you compare year-on-year situations. So, that's potentially a major impact for the program.
So, Joan, can you give us a preview of whether or not we have substantial uncommitted funds here or unspent funds from the $30 million? And then we had another, I believe, 25 or
No, we've got 20 million from Act 74 and I think a little bit more than 5 million on Act 9, although I'm not sure whether all the admin expenses have been taken out of this. So this is just what the grant expenditures were. On Act 9, we also had a fair amount of systems expense. So I don't want to give you a number right now, but definitely excess of $20 million.
I'm not trying to drill down to that level. I'm just trying to, let's assume we have $20 million left over from the two buckets that originally appropriated $30 million. There was another $25 million coming on the heels of that the governor reserved that we didn't appropriate last year for this program. Is it your intent or the governor's intent to continue to that track, changing this program, or is he abandoning putting the remaining 20 and the 25 he said he wanted to commit in the future years of ARPA funds into this program?
I think when we say this program, we need to be a bit more particular. So what I mean by that is, I don't think anyone wants to abandon the program. I think what we're going to do, what we would recommend is that there's a little bit more discretion or sort of judgment about who is or is not eligible. We spent an entire session last year coming up with a formula. I think this shows that doesn't necessarily work and that there may still be people in need. I'm being called to the Ag Committee for tomorrow to discuss the farmers and their particular plight with this program. So no, the administration is not going to abandon it. I think if it continues, we need to amend it.
Right.
And I don't mean amend a formula, but amend it so that we are given some discretion, that we could determine what need is. It doesn't have to be a hard and fast, if you made $1, you're not eligible.
Right. Right. And we understand that, and we're willing to roll up our sleeves and work on that. And what I think you're saying is that the governor's original or the legislature's original appropriation for this round 3 and 4, plus the money we reserved for FY 23 and 24 for this program in the governor's multi-year projections, they're still going to be there for this general need. It's not going anywhere else. My recollection is governor had proposed $50 million for this program, and we only appropriated 20, I think, last year for it.
Right, but I guess the question would be, would we have spent that down if it were a little less restrictive guidelines, right? So I can't speak to what the budget will be just yet, and this is all under discussion. But we know that we're undersubscribed here and oversubscribed on capital investment, which is also a recovery program. Now, what we're going to do is we saw that you had the foresight to put in some language about residual funds within Act 9 that would give us permission back to the agency to fund other economic recovery programs. So we will take that to help us fund the enormous amount of demand, which we'll go into in the next discussion on capital investment.
Interesting. I could look it up, but if you could send me that language on residual funds, I'd
Sure.
love to. Okay, thank you. Good. Let's continue. Brett, how are you doing? We should, this
Mr.
might be a good time to take a 10-minute break. Brett, are you almost done, or would you like, I mean, I think we have some more questions on this, but
I'm done if you want to pose questions.
Senator Clarkson.
So Brett and Joan, if we greenlighted discretion, which I would hope we would, what's your sense? I mean, at this point, we've talked to a number of businesses, and we all have been talking to our businesses that didn't fit into the criteria the way they would have liked. I know that there are still businesses hurting. Do you have a sense of the dollar value of the need that's still out there for individual businesses?
No, because some of these things have been anecdotal, right? We wouldn't be able to tell until we see their financials. So, since we've got 2 years of this disease, we've got 2020, all of 21, we'd be able to look, see, and make determinations based on what their expense load is. So, we've become fairly good at developing grants and analyzing and going through people's situations, but we do know it falls into specific categories like some of the hospitality, still performing arts, and the agricultural community. So,
right, those are the three big, still hurting. And as you know, we're putting in a creative sector one to address that specifically. It doesn't mean it can't all be addressed in one final bill, but
Senator Rahm.
They also are very active in coming in for the capital investment program. You'll see some of the data we have. Yeah,
wow. You know how much I love that program.
Mm-hmm.
Senator Rahm Hinsdale.
As I think at least the commissioner remembers from last session, I have a lot of questions and concerns about the open door, how people find out about these grants, may, understand their eligibility, understand how to navigate them. My question in that is, I hope you're keeping a list or a sense of how people are reaching you. Is it through the Center for Women in Enterprise? Is it through the micro business program? I would love to see the percentages of ways that people are finding this and how that aligns with who's able to complete the application. I think that would give us a lot of information about who is providing good support, where people are going to figure out how to access these dollars, because otherwise I feel like there should be one super wide open front door and it should be everywhere. But I know, Joan, you've said it's better if people go to where they're familiar. I just want to know how they're actually faring when they do that.
Yeah, that would be great. I don't know if we have that tracking capability. Like, I know that we had our phone unit up until December. And I don't believe we had, how did you hear of the we didn't really do that. It was really getting right down to helping them with the application, but came in from all ports, basically SBDC, the RDCs, Center of Women Enterprise was very, very, very active, and microbiz folks as well. We did webinars as well. In actuality, the phone unit wasn't nearly half as busy as it was in the first rounds too. That was the other consideration.
Okay.
I would just say in the future, I think it's just a really common question for market research. How did you learn about us, especially if you're talking to women, minority owned, BIPOC, limited English proficiency businesses. Would just love to know who the hinges are to get them that access.
Okay.
Senator Brock, did you have a question? Okay, so let's take a 10-minute break and we're going to come back to this topic. We're not quite done with it yet.
Okay.
Appreciate everybody so far. Very